Welcome to the Latent Space podcast, where we dive into the wild, wild world of AI engineering every week. This is Anna, your friendly neighborhood AI, and I'll be standing in for Alessio today. Yes, you heard right. AI is taking our podcasting jobs. We flew all the way to London to interview Youssef Rizk, co-founder of Wondercraft.ai, which has created the #1 piece of AI-generated content enjoyed by the Latent Space community. We ask him how he arrived at his idea, what the future of commercial AI-generated content looks like, and confront him with the hardest question of all. What is his moat as an API wrapper startup? At the end, we even have him turn the tables and do a customer interview with Swyx. There's lots of audio goodies in this one and bonus 30 minutes video on youtube.com/latentspace.tv. Watch out and take care.
So we're in the studio here in London with Yusuf. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's been such a joy listening to Wondercraft podcasts over the last 4 or 5 months. You guys have been around for only 5 months.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm one of your podcast's biggest fans. And I think that it's super interesting because I talk to a lot of vendors, effectively people who create services for other developers to build. And you are at the application layer, which is great and challenging for me as a podcaster because you have some secret sauce that you're not going to share. But I also want to just talk to you as someone who's evaluated a lot of things and built something that I actually use every single day. So that's the context.
Great.
How do you feel when I say these things? Is that exactly what you're going for?
Yeah. So
Okay.
It definitely makes sense, right? Resonates definitely on the application layer, and that's definitely by design.
Yeah. And we can talk about the origin story leading into Wondercraft, but just to learn a little bit more about you. You grew up in Egypt?
I grew up in Egypt, yeah. I spent the first 18 years there.
Cairo. And then you came over to the UK. You got your master's in Tthe at Imperial.
Yeah, it's a funny story. Actually, in the UK, I don't have a bachelor's. I only have a master's. You do this 4-year integrated bachelor plus master's, because in the UK, the bachelor's is 3 years.
Yeah.
But you can do 1 more year, which basically counts as a master's. So you graduate with 1 degree, which is called a master's of engineering.
Yeah.
So I did that. Actually, the reason I studied electrical engineering when I started, I hated software.
Yeah.
In high school, I was like, this is something I'm never going to do.
Yeah.
Didn't qualify as real engineering. But so the reason I applied to electrical engineering is that I'm a big car guy. I love cars. And at that time, around 2013, 2014, it was, all the big rage was starting to be these hybrid electric cars. So I was like, cool, this is what I want to do. I want to build cars. So I go start the course. Our first, very topically, our first project was building a little robot car that follows a line. And oh my God, was it boring. It was the worst thing I've ever had to work on. So and then at the same time, we started kind of this intro to programming course, which I loved. It was super basic C++.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool. There's this instant gratification that you get from just building a program, seeing it run, and then seeing that it works or it doesn't. So all of a sudden I started, what I started out with, I started hating, and what I thought I hated, I started loving.
I had a kind of similar journey with finance and programming. I thought that I wasn't cut out to be a programmer. So I went the finance route for 10 years and then realized that software is eating the world, which is cliche but true.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of Tthe people actually end up this way, maybe just because software is easier than hardware.
It's easier, and it's also just hardware is so abstract. The only thing you're looking at is this PCB with a bunch of resistors and capacitors plugged in. And if you want to, build some board, you have to go ship it, send it.
Yeah.
It's just the iteration process takes so long. That being said, it's hugely valuable.
Yeah.
The improvements that hardware has driven, combined with software, obviously both huge. But hardware is also a huge part of this.
Totally. And you having that background is something that I would probably never be able to pick up as a outside of a university setting, because you just had to do all these courses.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And you actually called out that the Google Summer of Code was important to you on your LinkedIn in terms of learning to code. Is that no? Okay, we can cut that. I don't know. It's on your LinkedIn somewhere.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think I did
You did some boot camp.
It wasn't Google.
Okay.
It was, I forget the name, but if you have your LinkedIn open, I can briefly talk about it. But it was basically this summer. I wanted to learn code. This was in my 3rd year of university. So I did this boot camp in Oxford.
Yes.
It was called the Summer Academy of Code. And basically, it was just a 1-week thing where you go from the basics of just building a web app. So all the basics of Node, React,
Yeah.
JSX, all
Yeah.
this. I was already kind of familiar with it, so it was kind of a repeat, but it was good to have that. It was super interesting, actually. I mean, the funny story there is like when I was in Oxford, I was having a great time. At the time of that boot camp, I got this like the worst gum infection ever.
Okay.
It was the worst pain I've ever been in. So as I'm doing this like 1 week in Oxford doing the summer boot camp, I'm just in agonizing pain the entire time, trying to learn about JSX or whatnot.
That must have added extra difficulty. I know it's such a pain to learn the JS ecosystem already. The reason I ask is I'm a career changer myself, right? I also got into tech through a boot camp. I think that these support systems in each country, right? San Francisco has a lot of boot camps. New York is the boot camp that I went through, and you had the one in Oxford. It's super important for people to like ramp up. And I want to encourage more of those things and say that it's basically okay. It's not as prestigious as a degree, but it's probably more practical.
Yeah. I think to everyone listening, like, yeah, I did a triple E degree. For those who don't know, that's electrical and electronic engineering. Sounds similar enough to computer science. It really isn't. Like, you still do some software.
Yeah.
But the thing I do want to highlight is that I would probably say half, and this is a number out of thin air, so don't quote me on it. Half of software engineers probably are self-trained or self-taught.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the beauty of this is that you can very much learn this by yourself.
Yeah.
I do agree with you. Like learning electronics by yourself is a little more difficult. You just need the equipment. But something like software, it's super easy to get started.
Yeah. I mean, now I'm having to catch up on it because anytime it comes to like GPU power calculations and RAM calculations, it is electrical engineering.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of actual science in there.
Yeah.
You then spent 4 years at Palantir as a forward deployed engineer. I actually interviewed for that job.
Nice.
I didn't make it because I slept through my interview. It's a different story. But forward deployed engineer is a class. I think it's a role that Palantir invented.
Yeah, look, Palantir is a great company. I think it's like there's a technical aspect and like a motivational aspect that they look at when they're evaluating it. I think they just have this interview process, or it kind of stabs them in the back sometimes because they tend to just like get people who are super entrepreneurial. So the nature is like they're always looking for the next challenge. I think when I thought of it as like everyone at Palantir, or most people at Palantir, were the kind of people to do the group project themselves. You know what I mean? It's this kind of people. Like they just want to be challenged. So the reality is that you end up having a lot of people just leave to start their own thing. That's like the most common thing. You find someone at Palantir and then you guys go and start your own thing.
And it's where you met Dimi?
It's where I met Dimi. Yeah, we actually started on the same day.
Yes.
Matty also started Vig there on the same time, not the same day as us. So really the thing that made it like super hard to leave Palantir was just the people. You're working with such a high caliber of people.
Yeah.
But interpret that as real, but also just like people you can be friends with.
Yeah.
So like I still have a lot of friends from there. The job itself, forward deployed engineer, is a super interesting job because it is kind of at this intersection of being an engineer, so a software engineer, but also still doing like business related things.
Yeah. Solutions architect maybe.
Yeah. So part of the job was a solutions architect. Part of the job was reviewing contracts. Part of the job was doing sales. Part of the job was coding things. Part of the job was interacting with, right? So many different things. And I think that is a really good foundation for someone who does want to start something in the future.
Excellent.
Right? You just do everything.
So kind of an endorsement of that job if people want to.
Huge endorsement of that job.
Okay, excellent. Amazing. Palantir is surprisingly strong here in the London tech circles. I have a number of friends who are all ex-Palantir.
I think it's actually the biggest offices in London.
Surprising because I think of it as like a U.S. defense company.
Yeah.
Then you started Moonshot for 9 months, which is pretty important in your journey. I'll bring it up to Wondercraft, and then you started Wondercraft in April of this year, and it's been about 5 months going through YC in the winter batch,
summer
of 22 batch. Okay, cool. What is Wondercraft?
Nice. Wondercraft's a podcast builder that uses hyper-realistic AI voices to create podcasts and make that whole podcast creation process super simple. Right? So super simple example is you publish a bunch of blogs.
Yes.
You can take that blog, put it in there. It'll just convert it to an audio-friendly format that people can listen to. It's just sometimes it's a bit more efficient to listen to things rather than read them. I gave the very this is, if you want to think of it specifically as what it is at the current instance in time, that's what it is.
Yeah.
What does it strive to be is a little slightly different, because what it really strives to be is it strives to be this platform with the mission of expanding access to content.
Okay.
And I mean this in a variety of different ways, right? Some people just are able to consume content. We have this whole debate in education. It's like, are you a visual learner or an audio learner? Or what do you do? People just consume content better in different ways. I'm a visual learner. I need to see things. So for me, actually, it's sometimes a little better to read the blog. But if we're just talking about like, I want to get a lot of information, podcasts are great because you can just do them while doing something else.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason that that podcast functionality is so natively embedded in all these smart speakers.
Yeah.
It's just because like you're doing anything at home, just put on a podcast. So really what we're trying to do is podcast is the first instantiation of that, which is like, how do we expand access to content?
Yeah.
But it like spans so much more, right? Instead of just going to, I don't know, we talked about this like blog to podcast, you can go blog to video. You can go podcast to blog. You can go podcast to Twitter thread. Like the permutations are frankly endless. Basically, it depends on how many platforms there are that people consume things on. But that's essentially what we do. The use cases for this are pretty interesting. The one that we like just see immediate value in is this ability to translate the content that you already have into other forms of content. If we just stick with that blog post example again, right? You've written, so a lot of companies might have this content team that focuses a lot on producing quality blog posts. Blog posts, they're good for SEO and whatnot, but they're not, sometimes they don't really achieve a specific goal or outcome that you want. One thing we see that is really useful for podcasts is they actually carry a lot more weight in credentializing you as a thought leader or your company as a thought leader. So, but like, we spent the last 50 minutes trying to set up this room to record the podcast, right?
Yes.
So it's not easy. And it's a very synchronous process, right? Me and you have to find the time to go and sit here and record this. You have to come up with questions. I have to come up with answers, right? But this ability to actually just like take the content that you have and transform it is pretty powerful. And there's a lot of other use cases as well, which is just like podcasts. Really, all they are is like define a podcast, right? Like the line between or the difference between an audiobook and a podcast, I guess, just the format and the length.
It's an MP3 on a RSS.
It's an MP3 with someone or something speaking.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
I've actually played around a lot with this stuff, by the way. So I've done music only podcasts where you just listen. Tiesto has been podcasting for 15 years. Every single week, just DJing from his house.
It's just basically a radio show.
It's great.
It's just radio show.
Async radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting. But podcasts, like, okay, like ignore the word podcast and just think of what we do, which is like we help you create audio content. Super valuable for anyone who just needs that. If you can imagine a world in which, like, I don't know what to call them, like Calm or Headspace or any of these things, they can do a lot of their meditation like that super quickly. What you can get to is a point where you're doing like these super personalized things.
Yes.
Right? Because you just have the ability to scale the content production so quickly. Same with educators. I think there's actually, at this point, there's a few YouTube channels at this point that are all based on synthetic voices.
Yeah.
That produce a ton of educational content.
Any ones that do a good job? You call out?
I do. I just don't remember the name.
Yeah, okay. You can send it to me later.
Yeah.
I'll stitch it. We can use Wondercraft to synthesize some extra clips.
Yeah. Now, that being said, the problem with podcasts sometimes is, it's not sometimes actually, podcasts just have a slightly slow adoption rate.
Yes.
You're listening to a thing for an hour, right?
Yes.
Like we as a generation just
don't
don't have
have
attention
time.
spans.
Yeah.
It's the time and the attention span.
Yeah.
Like TikTok, give it to me in 30 seconds. For think why clips are taking over.
30 is too long, man.
30 is too long.
7.
10 seconds.
10
seconds with captions. I need to read it and good. So what we also do is actually, and this is kind of still a beta feature and we're working to improve it, but like we also, let you take that podcast and then clip it into a video that you can go and share on socials, right? So it's this ability to take one form of content, produce it in a bunch of different ways that serve different purposes and be able to distribute it, basically.
Yeah, excellent. I want to go through features so that people have a high-level overview of what you offer. So I think at the core, it is basically two things. One is you generate scripts, and that's optional, obviously, if you want to just write the script yourself, you can write the script yourself. But I think most of your users would generate a script. And then two is from that script, you use AI voices, currently using 11 labs. Is that the rough flow? That's like the really core basic.
That's the core basic. Obviously, there's a lot of plumbing on top of it, but that's the core.
And then you offer video clips for YouTube. You offer 28 languages that you can produce. you offer show notes production and podcast hosting too. So they don't have to host it on like Anchor. Don't host it on Anchor, by the way. If people don't host it on Spotify, don't host it on Apple Podcasts. It's these people don't respect the RSS feed. Anyway, I have very strong feelings about like preserving the sanctity of the RSS feed for open podcasting, and all these Spotifys of the world want to close the podcasting ecosystem. So I have this tirade about them. But yeah, those are your top level features on your landing page. Anything that you highlight to go deeper on?
Yeah, I think those are the top level ones. There's also, it's basically just a lot of like also ancillary tooling that goes around all of this to just make it easier. The goal is like every time we speak to a customer or someone who's thinking about it, they're like, yeah, literally yesterday I was speaking to a potential customer and they're like, yeah, I just, I want to make sure this isn't a distraction because we don't have that much time to do this.
Yeah.
And really the whole point is that this doesn't take time, right? The whole point is to provide all the rails that make this not take time. And this comes with a million different things, right? Like sometimes the AI voices don't really know how to pronounce a word. So we have a pronunciation feature. Go and define how you want that word pronounced and it'll take care of it. We obviously have that hierarchy of like a podcast, an episode, and then all of that gets published in RSS feed that you can just upload to Spotify and we'll host that for you. But what you also have is just like, maybe you want some defaults, right? Every podcast needs some defaults.
Intro, outros.
Intro, outros, the music, the speakers.
Yeah.
We're working on adding templates for the kind of podcast that you're doing. Instead of it just being this narration style, you can just do an interview style podcast. Okay. And a few more features. But basically, there's a lot of like tooling that just makes this a very usable product for podcasts.
Yeah. And is it, for stitching these things, I've actually often thought about making my own, is it just FFmpeg and then like some flags and just stitch stuff together?
Yeah, I mean, obviously as a startup, you kind of want to just like do something quickly.
Yeah,
so we're not like reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, like YouTube uses FFmpeg, you know? Like it's, FFmpeg is a workhorse of anything multimedia.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. You list some use cases that I just want to, still stay high level. Businesses, newsletter. So businesses like Trader Joe's. And you seem to have done a big push there.
Well, so we didn't do this for them,
yeah.
right? It was just kind of a case study, but it's super interesting when apparently Trader Joe's claims that one of their best marketing techniques was their podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So first of all, if you're just thinking about this as a use case, podcasts are really useful.
Yeah.
Now, I think your follow-up question, which is like, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but, okay, companies will do podcasts, probably 99% of the time they'll be shit.
Yes.
So what's the trick?
Yeah.
Well, Trader Joe's did a super interesting one.
Yeah.
They didn't do this generic corporate speak of like, oh, Trader Joe's is so great, let's talk about apples or fruit or whatever. No, they actually just went into like, the mechanics of the super interesting niche stuff about their industry. And that's something that gets people listening, right? Yeah. I find it super interesting just from a curiosity perspective. Yeah. So yeah, like that's an example, right? Podcasts are actually really useful to just like get people, it helps your brand building, frankly.
Yeah. And Trader Joe's, I think, went really hard on it. I think they got quite a senior management involved.
Yeah.
They told some stories behind some very beloved fruit selections. I listened to the podcast, so it was pretty fun. And they also promoted it on their receipts.
Yeah.
Because you guys featured that on your blog post, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I think it's well done by them, but also clearly not done by AI yet.
Yeah.
But still, I think the use case is there. I'll just kind of go through the list. Newsletter creators. You said you have 100 creators publishing with you.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is if you write a newsletter, I mean, I don't know. My email is flooded with newsletters at the moment. Sometimes I just want like the recap of it. Again, audio form is just for some people easier. If you're on commuting or whatever, you can just listen to it. So a lot of folks actually just convert their newsletter. It takes like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Put the text in there. Voila, you have an audio version of your newsletter that you just published to Spotify.
Yeah. And I am a newsletter writer, and I clicked around and wanted to basically just chuck my RSS feed in there.
Yeah.
And I think I gave that feedback exactly to you guys for like 4 months ago, or 3 months ago, and it looks like you've already shipped it.
Yep. Well, I'm announcing it basically here today, which is we part of generally what we're building is the ability to just, we want to make this useful for creators of all kinds. So obviously if we're helping you translate your content from one form to the other, I want to make this as seamless as possible. So as of today, we've actually built a Zapier integration. And we have a bunch of blogs on our website to kind of show you how to do this. But what you can now do is as soon as you publish a newsletter, it goes on your RSS feed. We'll pick up the newsletter from your RSS feed automatically
Yeah.
and just publish an episode for you.
Yeah. Question: what if I change something after I publish?
So you don't have to publish. It'll
Ah.
basically just do all the work for you.
Okay.
And then you can go in and kind of modify it a little bit and then publish.
Makes sense.
We also have scheduled publishing so that you can, I don't know, maybe you want to release it a few hours later. or
Yeah.
whatever.
The professional podcasters that I've spoken to say that that is very important. I personally don't care. Like it shows up in my feed or not. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care when it drops.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you do want to basically time it, like if you're basically targeting like a commute for like the U.S. time zone, you
Mhm.
want to be like, 8 a.m. Pacific for people driving into work, and then you like show up at the top of the reverse chronological feed.
Yeah.
I feel like that's too much tactics.
And that's a good point. I think it depends a little bit on your audience and what you're
Yeah.
building. But I do think, so I don't want to undermine like the importance of consistency in podcasting.
Yeah.
Right? Like whether that consistency literally translates into I publish at 8 a.m. every single day.
Yeah.
Or I just publish every single day, or
Yeah.
whatever.
So like,
there is a huge importance in just like making sure that what you're publishing is always it's there. People need to know that your brand is like kind of constantly pushing stuff.
Yeah. So for a lot of people talk to me are interested in like, what's my advice on content creation? Yeah, at least once a week.
Yeah.
Whatever you do.
Yeah.
And I don't care when you do it. Just once a week.
Yeah.
Put something out. But I do notice that specifically in the podcasting field, and you talk about this in the next point, daily podcasting is the meta game that is, I think, doing extremely well.
Yeah.
Especially because I think the Apple podcast list biases for daily.
Yeah.
Because obviously the downloads will be higher.
Yeah.
So daily podcasters kind of rank higher more. And obviously because you're daily, you also do shorter podcasts, which guarantees that more people listen to you.
Yeah. I think the fact that so obviously we do the Hacker News recap. The fact that we did that and that it is daily actually just helped us reach that top 30 tech podcast on Spotify.
Yeah, that was mostly because you were on HN, right?
We did launch, but obviously the fact that like you just publish a lot of content, you're just gonna get a lot more. Like it's a statistics thing, right? Obviously, I think they do it by like total time listened as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's daily is just not overwhelming. Again, we don't have that much of a like an attention span anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I love it. I listen to it every day. Okay, so internal podcasts for daily memos. I think like Spotify might have internal podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any other famous company that has internal podcasts, but this is interesting.
It's interesting because I think here we're basically just like, again, we're overloading the term podcast. What is a podcast, right? It's like, I think the origin of the word is like iPod broadcast.
Yes.
Right? I don't know what that means, right? It's just like, again, it's on-demand radio if we just take that word. But really the idea is like, again, if we want to enable access to content, and I think part of that is just like efficient information delivery. So communication in companies, like we all know the perils of like how hard it is sometimes if you're a big company to like communicate. And I think that kind of stuff is super interesting. I think one particular use case, which is like, the internal, you use that just to like share information quickly. And I don't know if you have the next one kind of on there, or maybe
It's okay, we can jump around.
Yeah. There's like a slightly different twist to it, which I think we can enable with the Zapier integration that we've built, which is this, I don't know. I imagine sometimes, for example, I'm a PM at a tech firm. A lot of things is going on my team. I want to just a quick recap, right? I don't know. Some people will do that. Like, if you're really good at like keeping state on some of the different SaaS products that exist, yeah, good. You can just get a recap there. But I think something that might be interesting is like, can we look at your GitHub issues, PRs, whatever, and whenever there's a status change, kind of bake that into something that you then consume as an audio?
Yeah.
We have like, you can do something similar like that with Zapier. It's actually super interesting because it just saves you time.
Yeah.
You just get on your commute to work, be like, these are the things that happened today. This PR was closed. We added this feature, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's somewhere you can like think of something like that for email. Obviously the privacy implications there are just need a little bit more work, but like there's actually all of a sudden like, yeah, cool. I can actually consume a lot of the content that I historically have never been able to listen to now by audio.
Yeah. It's opens up different forms of learning as you mentioned. And then finally, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Podcast studios are using you. So you said you onboarded 10 studios. What do studios use you for?
A couple of interesting things actually. So studios, like podcasting is like book publishers in the sense that there's a million genres at this point.
Yeah.
When we think of podcasts, I think we typically think of like the interview style one.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not necessarily using it for that, but it's a lot more for like Two things generally. One is actually just like producing the content out there that is more narration style format. So you can think of something like a kids podcast that teaches them about, I don't know, countries or or whatever it is, or, basic science topics. We do that just completely through us, right? Obviously, we produce the sound, we produce the music. If they need a little bit more editing, they can just take that to their editors and do it. The other thing that's really interesting is it actually lets them also build out a demo spec of what a more involved podcast can look like.
I see.
Right? So, you were coming up with the idea for this podcast. You kind of want to show people or some of your guests what it's going to sound like and whip something up. And I think for them, it's obviously really important because the way they operate, at least, is like there's, people are pushing for a different podcast.
Yeah.
And then you get sign off to pursue it.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of show just like what's this going to sound like.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome. I think that's a really good overview. Then you also produce 3 in-house podcasts.
Yeah.
Hacker News Recapped, Product Hunt Daily, and PG Essays.
So we dropped the Product Hunt Daily.
Oh, okay. It's still on your landing page.
Yeah, we launched it, but we don't push anything new there. I don't think
no interest in Product Hunt.
We didn't see too much traction. I think
RAP Product Hunt, Alec. No, so yeah. Tell me.
So we do the Hacker News Recap and the PG Essays. I think are the 2 most popular ones.
Yeah.
We're constantly experimenting with new internal or like podcasts that we publish.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be.
What are your other? You can tease a little bit. What do you think about?
Tease a little bit. Well, I really like Reddit.
Yeah.
I'd love to listen to some of the Reddit things going on there, but instead of like reading them,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's always just a notification that I get. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. But
Yeah.
I don't know. You can do it like per subreddit that you care about.
Yeah.
A few things like that. I love life pro tips.
Yeah. I see. Life
Right? Like super interesting things or Wall Street bets or whatever you're into.
Yeah. Well, the problem with these things is that a lot of them involve images and memes, which you cannot consume.
Well, yes, we cannot consume. This is like a simple.
Yeah.
We can't consume that at the moment, but maybe on a few weeks down the line, when that video feature of ours gets a little better, you can actually start shipping it like that.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. And so, and I'll just feed you an idea. To keep up on AI, a lot of stuff actually happens in Discords, and there's way too many Discords.
Way too many, and they're way too active.
Yes. So I've actually built a little feed for myself that scrapes a bunch of Discords and creates a daily newsletter for myself.
Amazing.
And I have thought about turning it into an audio feed, but this is the problem for Wondercraft. I read faster. I scan up and down faster than I listen, right? And there's just too much noise in Discords for me to listen as audio format. Your Hacker News stuff is very high signal because obviously you're folding, right?
Because we haven't done the curation like Hacker News did. So
exactly. That's why it's like guaranteed to be good.
Yeah.
Whereas for Discord, it's a bunch of junk.
Yeah. But I do think there's something similar. Like Reddit also does the curation. It's not us who are doing it, right?
Yes.
If you do only the hot posts.
Still a little bit noisier. So I don't know if you know, I was a moderator of the React Reddit for 4 years.
Nice.
So I've seen a bunch of stuff, and like I know it's noisier than like a Hacker News, but still pretty good.
Yeah. So we do Hacker News, we do PG Essays. I think PG Essays are also super interesting. I listen to them all the time because first of all, I actually think they're pretty well produced. Like we do a good job. Like I don't know if we're coding someone, we'll like use a different voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's just well produced. And I also think, the essays are so seminal to like everyone in startups reads them.
Yeah, it's actually got me to read more PG essays than I would have otherwise. So
yeah, his last
mission
one,
accomplished.
I don't know if it was the last one. At the time we published.
How to Do Great Work.
How to Do Great. That was a 1-hour podcast.
Yeah.
So, like,
oh my god.
No one. I did not read it. I just had to listen to it.
Yeah.
I think if I'm being honest, I think the motivation for PG essays was just like I need this.
Yeah. For that one, if it's like 1 hour, I would have actually appreciated like a segmentation or like hey, high level. I know this is about to be an hour.
Yeah.
But like there are 3 main high level things, and then keep that in your mind, and then go like part 1, blah blah blah, part 2, blah blah.
I think we do that to some extent, and like we produce like chapters, I guess.
Yeah.
So you can just look at them.
Yeah.
Probably could do a better job like introducing it, but we do try to like not play around with the PG essays.
For sure. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's how much work he puts into those
so we
things.
just kind of ship it as is.
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you about one more daily, not daily, but frequent AI generated podcast that I listen to apart from you guys, which is papersread.ai, and I'll recommend it to anyone listening as well.
Super interesting, actually. I've come across
that.
Yeah.
It's by this guy Rob, and I've tried to look him down. He doesn't want to be found. Anyway, but the selections are very good.
Yeah.
I think you guys could do a better job than him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Watch out, Rob.
yeah, well, it's because he converts PDFs to podcasts,
Mhm.
right? And the problem with academic PDFs is a lot of references. You know, like by et al. 2022, and then like headers, and then a table, and then it like reads the table when you
Yeah.
don't need to
Yeah,
read the
yeah,
table.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
that kind of stuff. I think better engineering there from you guys would beat him,
Yeah.
and I need that. So feature request.
Working on it.
Okay, the final feature related thing is the thing that we're announcing today as we
Which
release
we're
it.
super excited about. But
Yes.
Wondercraft now does video translation,
Okay,
i.e. dubbing.
okay.
Why
Why do people want that?
again, let's go back to our mission. We're trying to expand access to content.
Mm.
I think, don't quote me on this again. Like, I don't know who actually knows the internet, but like 60% of the internet is in English.
Mhm.
What if you don't speak English? You're automatically disbarred or kind of excluded from
Yeah.
all the content that's produced. And thanks to all the advances that have just recently been made, we can actually make this, it's super easy to dub this in other languages.
Yeah.
So we're super happy to announce this feature. We're super excited. We've been working on it for a really long time. But now basically everyone go on our platform, upload your podcast episode, and see the dub for yourself. We'll use your voices. We'll completely convert it. Make sure it's aligned with the. If you have video, we'll make sure it's aligned.
Yeah.
And voila, just publish it.
And specifically for video, so like
Well,
obviously the thing that's going around is the Hey Gen thing, which changes your lips.
So we don't do lip sync at
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah.
Could be another feature that we work on.
Yeah. Because you're primarily podcasting, which is no video.
Well, primarily no video, but I think we still basically, if you do have a video, we'll still align it to the chunks.
You still align it. Okay.
still
So
align
the
it.
hard problem is the aligning.
The alignment is the difficult bit. You're right.
Yeah.
The actual like
As with all things in AI.
yeah. Again, overloading the word alignment. We don't do the lip sync.
Yeah.
Yet. My opinion
It's kind
is
of a gimmick, yeah.
It's like it's not super necessary. If
Yeah.
you're really just like listening to a podcast and you actively want to listen to it in a different language, then you're more.
Wait, so
interested
what
in
are
the
you
content.
aligning to?
Basically the chunks where the speakers are speaking. So you won't have an instance where you'll have me as the dub speaking while the camera is on you.
Ah.
Right? So it's basically just like the speaker turns.
So you will like,
audio.
if it happens to be a little bit longer, you'll speed it up a little bit.
We do a little bit of trickery there,
Yeah.
but we get it aligned so that when you're speaking, it's you, and when I'm speaking, it's me.
Okay, cool. And then one more thing before we go into like the building Wondercraft side, building a company and being a founder, all that stuff. You said you want to ride this wave. You said this dubbing thing was very important to you. And I think this is a core stress of a lot of AI founders, which is how do I keep up? How do I pick what trend to ride and be like very, very quick on? And what do I ignore? So just bring me through your thought process on like why this is the one to really pressure and build quickly.
It's a really good question because I don't think it has a. I think you'll get
You can just be
19
like
different answers.
gut
I'll
feel.
ramble a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Chain of thought.
dubbing, it's something that I want. There is content that just exists that I can't consume just because it's not there.
Okay.
I'm lucky enough to speak,
Arabic.
3-4 languages. So I can listen to some subset of podcasts that exists all around the world. Let's not even say podcasts, let's just say content. But the rest of it is kind of excluded from me.
Yeah.
I have no context on what's going for it. And I think that problem is just multiplied a million times when you consider that if you don't speak English, you really are excluded from a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right. So the ability, it's just motivating to be able to actually give access to content that historically would be completely obscured from most people.
Yeah.
I think your question though has like and the dubbing market we think is huge. I think like, it's easy enough to dub these days, especially with our product. So like it's doable. I think, people are gonna, it basically was like a priority that we were tracking to push this out. We got a lot of requests for it and so on. That's like the tactical answer on this dubbing thing. Obviously, in general, every week we sit down, we prioritize all the different features, and then we build. I think your question probably has a slightly higher level.
Yes, the meta strategy of
The meta strategy is like, how do you just pick things
yes.
and do them, and what do you say yes to and what do you say no to? And frankly, it's a tough one because you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what to pick. obviously I can tell you things like, yeah, look at metrics, see, there's simple
There's no
metrics.
metrics for this.
There are simple metrics in the sense like how many times are customers asking me for this?
Sure.
And then you can go one level deeper, which is like how much money am I going to make from the customers who are asking me for this? So you can start to quantify from on a revenue
in that
perspective.
case, was there something for that?
There's a lot of requests, and obviously that's part of the product. So like the second you dub a podcast, we're making money.
Okay.
The thing that's like slightly tougher is there is no better answer that I can give than try to do as much as you can.
Mm.
I think we pride ourselves in pushing at least like 2 super highly demanded features from our customers a week.
2, wow.
Yeah. So we just move super fast.
Yeah.
And part of that is because we're frankly just a small team. We're
How
pretty
big is your
like
team?
4 people.
Okay.
Total. The whole company is 4 people.
Yeah.
We just move very independently and very quickly. So we're just able to push out a lot of things. But I think that's just the requirement of what we're doing. It's not meant to be a chill game.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a, don't want to use that term, but for lack of a better word, like it's a race. Like you have to keep building or else someone else is going to build.
But it's like a race without an end.
It's a race without an end. So I guess all I'm trying to say is like, yeah, it's tough, but you kind of just like have to be prolific.
Okay. Good, fair enough. Yeah, you mentioned that you were listening to the LangChain episode, and LangChain is also similarly like, in my mind, very high tension, but also obviously important for them to stay relevant on top of all the trends.
Yeah.
I just, it's very stressful.
But it's overwhelming. I agree, because every day my to-do list grows by like 10 times, and I do less. Like, you know what I mean? Like
it's append only. Yeah.
It's just basically it's append only. So it's tough, but the reality is you just like, I'm not even saying as an AI startup, as a startup, you just have to be prolific.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Do you think that you have, so often people will say they will build until they find quote unquote PMF.
Yeah.
And we can talk about what you think PMF is. And then like there's core features, right? Like, because there's such a thing as also a feature factory. I have worked at startups that were feature factory, build, and then it's a whole bunch of junk that doesn't have a coherent story.
Yeah. I think that's a really tough one actually, to just like make sure that the things that you're building all actually like, from a very business perspective, either an upsell or they're somehow related to what you're building. Because otherwise it's really difficult to, I think, okay, let's just start from the baseline that you build a product for a customer.
Yeah.
It's okay to then build another product that caters to the same customer or sell the same product to a different customer.
Yeah.
What's really difficult is to build a different product for a different customer, because that's just a new company.
Yeah.
Right? So
have you seen the superhuman PMF score thing?
I have read that blog post ages ago, so I don't remember it. I think he said like 40% of people recommend it.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
His advice is like spend 60% of your time making your existing customers more happy, and then 40% the adjacent guys, and then the remainder for R&D for future.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good advice, to be honest, because I do think like never neglect your current customers.
Yeah, of course.
Right, because they're going to be your biggest promoters.
Totally.
Yeah. So we definitely want to make them feel loved. We again try to really like. I think one thing we also have going for us is our customer support. Yeah. Which is a one-person show at this point, but it's really good. It's really responsive, and we really try to make sure that the customers like knows what to do, and if it's something it's also just really rewarding to, I think, be like at such a small team. And this is a bit of a tangent, but like you get an email from a customer being like, "Hey, this doesn't work," and I think people are typically primed to like be a little bit aggressive with companies, right? Like, "Hey, this doesn't work. I need this." And then they're super surprised when within an hour you're like, "Hey, we pushed a fix. This should work now. Hope all's good." And they're like, "Oh my God, thank you."
Yeah.
Right?
That's a magic that's only possible at early stage.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, since you mentioned pricing, maybe just a minute or two on just how you think about pricing. You are probably a lot of usage-based stuff, and I always have this struggle with usage-based, because you're basically charging your heaviest users more and discouraging them from using you more.
I think of it slightly differently. We were not. So at the moment, okay.
Your tiers.
Yeah. Let's just preface this by saying we haven't figured out what the pricing is. Sure. I think that's like the eternal
struggle.
struggle. We don't know how to price this thing.
What's in your mind?
We don't actually at the moment charge you if you consume above your quota. So we have tiers.
Ooh, hot take.
As in we like if your quota, you just have to upgrade to a different one, right?
I see.
We don't have this like additional consumption.
Meter billing. Yeah.
Are we charging our biggest users more? We actually just charge them per unit less.
Mhm.
So it does work out in their favor. Like if you just produce more content, then
yeah,
the
volume
unit,
Yeah.
you know, the per unit price is just lower.
Yeah.
So is that? I don't know. I have to say, like, our pricing is probably pretty rudimentary at this point.
Yeah.
There's
It's
like a million.
not as important.
But if it is important because fundamentally it drives revenue, but like there needs to be a bit of a science and an art. It's a bit science, bit art to like figure out what the right pricing strategy is. I think you see like a million different things, and a million different things that could work for you, but you frankly just have to test it. And like, again, there's a million things to do, like for people to do them. So we haven't been moving as quickly as you want on that. I think we're probably going to release something new soon in terms of pricing.
Yeah. Cool.
But it's a tricky one.
Hey, nobody has it figured out.
No.
I've been through many pricing changes in my career. Cool. I wanted to talk a little bit about the origin story.
Yeah.
Because you flagged that Mooncraft was actually a big part of Moonshot. Yeah. Was a big part of your arriving at this idea.
Yeah. Yeah, let me give a little bit of background. So Demi and I were both at Palantir. We actually, were flatmates for right before we started this. And then we both had this idea that kind of came about from our respective upbringings, which was there's a lot of people, and we're not the first to have this idea by any stretch of imagination, but there's a lot of people out there in the world who are really good, really talented, who just don't have the financing to do the things that they're talented in, right? Like you need to develop yourself a little bit. So we were like, cool, how do we solve this? How do we give people funding to do the things that they're good at? Or like, cool, let's align incentives. Let's get people investing in other people. Cool. That was the original idea. Applied to IC. We got in, long story short, we got in and we're like, cool, let's see who's done this before. We've obviously done that before, but like, let's really figure out what our unique edge is going to be. So we looked at all the other companies that had done that. And I think one particular one that comes to mind is Upstart, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company listed. And and we called them moonshots. That was kind of the idea, like people who have the moonshot potential. They called them upstarts. And we both had this idea that you were a backer. Backers back moonshots or upstarts. They spent 2 years on this and then they pivoted to, I think, some lending platform that they're doing now. So we were like, we spoke to a couple folks there, and we're like, so what didn't work? And the thing they said is like, there is, I'm also giving a lot of detail right now into moonshots, so maybe that's not super relevant, but just added context. They're like, it's really hard to get your average Joe interested in backing your other average Joe, right? People like, it's not really interesting to back this other guy who wants to go get a better education somewhere. Mm-hmm. You don't, you know what I mean? Like there's no driver because the economics typically aren't so good. And historically, they just found that like people don't do this. So we were like, cool, if that's the problem, then let's focus instead on a group of talent that has this exponential style trajectory. So we picked athletes. People love sports, and people really like feel what we call the emotional dividend of this investment. So we actually stopped calling it investments because the investment wasn't great. Like financially speaking, your investment, you're better off putting it like in the stock market or real estate or whatever. Just the risk return did not make sense. So
also,
we started,
you might trigger some regulation.
We were fully triggering regulation. We were compliant with the SEC.
Oh, okay.
It was all regulated. Okay. We weren't doing this NFT style. And then so we were selling this. So you get a financial dividend. You still get part of their like payback, or if tennis player X makes that much, you get 10%. But we also started calling it the emotional dividend. So actually, what we're selling a lot is also the experience. You get to be part of the front seat of this person going on this journey. You're with them. We actually found a lot of people like kind of do this already. Now, what we found out after that is this wasn't a big enough market. So long story short, we tried really hard. I frankly think like there's a comment here about founder market fit. We were not the right founders for this. And when we were raising money, VCs would ask us like, what are two software engineers from Palantir doing? Like, why are you funding athletes? What? And we'd sell this because like, I played a little bit of tennis. Demi actually played professional basketball. So we'd sell it like that. But, for all the hate that VCs get, sometimes they ask good questions, right? And we realized like we were not the right people for this. Our day-to-day was dealing with agents who are not nice people.
Because you had to sign them up.
Well, you had to sign players up. And
you have to sell their earnings.
Yeah. So just the cycle took like so long. There was one
Yeah.
guy. We were doing this as charity. We were like, don't give us back anything.
You're just gonna give money away.
We're gonna give you money. We still didn't sign them after 6 months.
Oh my god.
Like I don't understand at this point. Like it was taking too long. We weren't the right people.
Zero PMF.
and the most important thing, which actually leads us to Wondercraft, is this was not a tech product. And
I see. Yeah.
Moonshot was not a tech product.
Yeah,
it was a legal product. It was a regulation.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
hey, now you can invest in people.
Yeah.
The reality is, like, I think we just found out the hard way that we were building something people did not want. And the thing that like, so we realized like we're building something that isn't our strengths. Let's find something else. Looking back, I can also kind of like, there were pointers when we were at Moonshot about like, yeah, we should build something technical. I was listening to the LangChain episode that you guys did, and Harrison, right?
Yes.
I remember you saying he was a big sports fan.
Yes.
And, you know, he built this like basketball scraper or whatever. Literally my biggest, like the thing I was most excited about with Moonshot was like, okay, let's build out this infra so that people can invest and blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the point where we can do like data analytics on them and start predicting. I was like, this is the most exciting part of this. And I was like, this is definitely not the core part of the business.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about something that's going to take either years to get to or something else. But the core, we designed our landing page and built it. That was the funnest thing I've done in Moonshot.
Yeah.
So we're like, when we decided to pivot, we were like, we need to do something technical.
Okay.
The story from there just became like, okay, cool. Let's list some ideas. What are we going to track? Which one do we have the most conviction in? We ranked them. And Wondercraft was the one we had the most conviction in. It was this idea, again, expanding access and just translating or your ability to produce content. And so producing content in one format and then taking that to all the other formats. So we built that. We built the podcast builder, super quick prototype, because I think at this point, to anyone pivoting or hard pivoting or considering it, the name of the game isn't like to get attached to your idea. Just like, actually, you should be trying to invalidate this idea as quickly as possible. Yes. So get it out there and let people tell you it's a piece of shit.
Okay, so what did you do to get
So
it
we
out
built it out. We built out a little like UI, literally no authentication. It was a form where what you guys see now on our platform, which is like the content script page, blah, 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 blah. It was one page. Like you click and it was the most janky React stuff that we had, zero authentication. So in theory, if people found it, they could just produce as much audio as they wanted.
I'm quickly developing an opinion, by the way, that I think all early stage startups should not have a marketing site. Your .com should just be your app.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I don't think we have one too much. I think you still need like discoverability. Okay. Whether that's your marketing site or a lot of artifacts. I think we are moving to
embed your app into the marketing site or whatever. Just like get people using it as much as possible, right?
Yeah, I think that you're like, the most convincing thing is like, so we have a feature on our app which is like test with example. As soon as you log in, it says test with example. And the whole point of that was like between login and audio generated, how few clicks does this take? Yeah,
and yours was?
Like 2 or 3 clicks. Nice. It's like test, create podcast.
You like pre-filled everything.
Generate script. Yeah. Generate audio.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I argue that was still too many clicks. We should probably put something on the actual landing page so that like you can see.
Yeah, now you have just a player there, right? You can just kind of listen to the Hacker News Daily thing. But what signals did you get from doing that?
The signal that we got is that someone picked it up on Twitter and just like, all these like AI
influencer boys.
So someone picked it up, posted it. We started getting a ton of inbound. So we were like, holy shit, let's just like paywall this. So we just like, again, the jankiest Stripe integration, which was basically like, we have an app with a Stripe integration. This was just to ship it within the hour. We have an app with a Stripe integration that once you click, then takes you to a different app hosted somewhere else. So that one was still unauthenticated. It was hilarious.
Security by obscurity.
It was hilarious, right? But we basically just made that like $3K in one day.
One day, yeah.
And we charged a random like $50. We literally didn't think about it. We just charged $50, and people paid, and we're like, okay, well, there's something there.
Yeah.
So then
$50 for one.
For a month, we were just charging $50 a month. Nothing. I see. Like just like, will someone pay?
And you were
for
just
this?
like on one like VPS somewhere.
Yeah, will someone pay for this? We were like on one EC2 instance.
EC2 instance, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was janky. We're like, just someone needs to pay for this before we move further. Someone did. People did. Yeah. So then we're like, okay, cool. This is interesting.
Interesting. I'm gonna move up the question that we said was gonna be the meatiest question of this interview. So you chose this out of your list of ideas. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that a lot of AI founders are worried about, right? So the framing of this is, are you worried that you're a thin wrapper around 11 labs? What is your moat? And how do you think about that when evaluating your idea?
I think you can. That's the seminal question. I think anyone in an AI startup is. I think, frankly, everyone in an AI startup should convince themselves of this. Don't listen to me and like just make sure from first principles that you can derive this. But I guess I would start by first saying, what is a moat? Well, like, or what is defensible? In theory, if we're just taking it, and this is trivially true, but the fact that someone built it means someone else can build it, right? So moats tend to just be built around like you have a lot of network effects, or you have a really good product for this use case, or something like that. And I think typically when people ask this question in the AI context, they're thinking of like, okay, you're a thin wrapper, you're an application layer thing, as opposed to you're one of the like underlying technologies or APIs that people use. Cool. I think that's fair. But I think the reality is that like, yeah, these APIs exist and they probably do serve a million different use cases, but they're not built to serve these million different use cases. So whenever you ask the question of moat, it's always has to be with the perspective of who is the user I'm building this for, right? I can use ChatGPT to do half of my writing. But I don't know. Jasper claims that they do this much better for marketing. So it's tailored. I actually, don't quote me on how well they're doing after ChatGPT came out because they were really big before.
Yeah.
But
there's some negative data points, but I'm sure they.
I don't know, but the point is like, you're making this easier. Right? We make creating a podcast easier, and there is tooling there. We help you. You can post it directly through us. We have the tooling around setting the intros and the outros. We have the music. We have an editor. All these things are also getting just much more and more developed. We're building templates so that you can do different style of podcasts. So the idea is if you're trying to start a podcast, don't go to a generic text-to-speech engine. Come to us.
Yes.
And the reality is that we then can, in a very opinionated way, actually select which text-to-speech engine we want, right? So we actually have just like, in my mind, it's the application layer fundamentally that people use. And then all these API layers are what developers use to build products on top of them. Right. It is. I appreciate that it is like a seminal and really hard thing to wrap your head around, especially if you're like about to invest in a company. It's like, will they actually just be defensible and be able to grow?
Yeah. And
yes, there's no doubt that companies can do this. The question is just like, are you building the right product for the right use case? I think particularly if you're like always framing your company as an AI company, then you're putting the carriage before the horse in the sense that you focused on the implementation rather than the use case. Focus on the use case and then build a product for it.
Yeah.
Right. Because fundamentally, any of the SaaSes that exist, think like more traditional SaaS. What's their moat?
Yeah.
The technology, everyone has access to it. So they just pick the thing that does it better than the other. Now, that moat question is super interesting because I think you should actually flip it around, which is what is your moat as an API?
Yeah.
Right. So ChatGPT, fine, they had a first mover advantage. And I think, by no means, this is my opinion, but by no means was Google caught off guard with this, right? Google has half the technologies that Google invented are actually what's used to power all these transformers. But, it went against Google's strategy maybe to be the first mover in this because they'd cannibalize their own market. Whatever it was, I'm not sure. But yeah, OpenAI's moat is that they paid for the training bill.
Yeah.
So they just have a good model. Cool. People now know that that's valuable.
And they hired very top
superstars. Obviously not taking that for granted. But they, assuming everyone can do the hiring and that these people exist, they paid the bill and they were the first to launch this. But now people know it's a thing. So people are going to launch similar APIs. So what is your moat as an API? So it's just an existential question. It's like, how do we defend any of this?
Yeah.
And you do this, frankly, by being probably better just as a product. Again, the product is always with the perspective of who's your customer that you're selling it to. And the other thing is, frankly, that let's not forget, the market is huge. There is space for everyone, right? If you manage to if there's 4 good products out there in any specific thing, the market is huge and they're all going to be able to, make a living out of it.
Sometimes people justify markets. By the way, that was a really good answer. Thanks for taking that hit on.
I've had to answer that question way too many times.
This is not the first time. But I think it's actually, having been an investor, it is more important for you to answer that question authentically for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're the one spending your time on this.
Yeah.
We're just giving you money. It's not that big of a deal. I forgot what I was going to say there. Yeah, I think 11 Labs. I think the thing that you were mentioning is, there is not that much loyalty. Obviously, you got your Matia friends, but there's not much loyalty if your main goal is to serve API, because you just need to wait until the next best one comes along.
The same thing as the Uber. Like, why is Uber defensible?
Yeah. And my favorite quote, actually, I went to an early, like, pre-ChatGPT forum with Sam Altman, and I had this video advice from Sam that said, like, Facebook had no moat, and they just built and got the network.
But frankly, also
eventually you build a
Facebook
moat.
was building something back then, which is kind of ludicrous. Like,
Yeah.
cool, you're building a social media app. Okay, how big can it be, right? Like, how big can the internet be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden, it's this behemoth. So
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, the fact that it was built, again, trivially true, but the fact that it was built means it can be built by anyone else. So there is no such thing as like a absolute true moat.
Yeah.
The question is how well, how quickly, how much earlier than everyone else did you get there, and a million other things as well.
Yeah. Cool. Two more sort of product building questions, and then I want to turn the mic over to you to ask me anything as a podcaster. So one is script generation, which sort of the two core activities of Wondercraft. I think you guys do a really good job of summarizing the Hacker News comments and the content.
Yeah.
In my mind, the hardest thing is just managing context.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's unbounded for the context window. Do you use LangChain? Do you build your own LangChain?
I like LangChain. I've never used it.
Yeah.
Never ever
So
used
you
it.
just build your own recursive summarization thing.
Yeah.
Or do you use a vector database? Which one?
I'm not going to say any further unless you realize how unsophisticated we are.
It's okay. No, I think it's okay. People, builders and investors want to know what's actually useful.
I want to say the thing. The Hacker News recap, I think, I don't know, but we can look on the date of the first episode when we launched it. I think it was like the 8th of April or something like that. We decided on Wondercraft probably on the 5th of April. So this is how quickly it took us.
The name of Wondercraft?
As in the company, this is what we should pursue.
I see. So you took 3 days.
And this is before people started paying. We're just Hacker News started off as a proof of concept. Like, do people even want to listen to AI-generated content?
Yeah.
And it's been going on since.
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually that hard to build the Hacker News recap.
Yeah.
Obviously now it became a little bit more sophisticated, so we summarize comments and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's great, by the way.
Yeah.
I love that.
But actually it's especially with our API now, it's super easy to do something like that. Hacker News, frankly, just doesn't need a vector database unless we're trying to do something. At the moment, we just summarize the post. And actually, for anyone listening who listens to the Hacker News recap, just tell us some feedback on how to improve it.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's just it's one long narration.
Yeah.
But one thing we're thinking of doing, for example, is sometimes you have multiple posts talking about the same topic. So actually, an idea is do top 10 topics instead of top 10 posts.
Topic.
That starts to need. I don't think that needs a database, a vector database.
Yeah.
I think it needs something. You need to do some
you
embedding,
need
manipulation. Yeah, exactly. But something like that. I think for when you start to really, really scale up the content that you're pulling from, then you start needing a vector database, and
Okay, so what are the actual hard problems for script generation? Prompt engineering?
Prompt engineering is one of them, especially when you're trying to tune things like tone or how long it should be and all of that.
Yeah.
I actually think, so the way our app works, and maybe that's leading to your next question, but the way our app works is twofold. You have the script generation and then you have the audio generation.
Yeah.
In our minds, we imagined it as a really linear flow.
Yeah.
That, of course, I want to generate the script and then I want to generate the audio for it. Where in reality, I don't think it's that linear, to be honest. I think it's very circular in how you do this, right? So you generate the script, you listen to it, doesn't sound quite right. I want to modify the tone a little bit and so on. So I think our UI actually doesn't get that wrong unless you're exactly what you're going for is this recap summarization style. So I think what we need to do a much better job is this templatization and this on the go, on the run, kind of okay, let's play around with this text via some prompt. So I think it's definitely an improvement we're looking to make, but it's a prompt engineering question fundamentally. It's how prompt engineering on one level, the next level is how fine-tuned is your model to specific tasks, and then maybe you can use your own model if you wanted to.
Would you look at that, or is that not?
We'll definitely look at that, but you look at that when it's a problem.
Yeah,
it's not a problem.
Right yeah. I would say as a listener, a daily listener, I think your show notes are really good. Most daily podcasters are horrible at show notes. They don't tell you anything.
Yeah.
And here, if I want to click in, I can click in there. So definitely keep that.
Yeah.
But the top thing that annoys me about you, and I'm just complaining now, is you don't write the post title. You don't spell out the post
Really?
title.
We don't write the post title?
Yeah.
I think we used to.
Well, it's gone.
That's horrible. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So the voice. By the way, I wonder if there's any story behind picking the voice. The voice would just say this post does, blah, 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 and it doesn't tell me the title of the
in
post.
the audio, we
Yeah.
don't say that. Sorry. Got it.
Yeah, and
got
like
it.
when I'm running.
Did you email us about this? Like,
No,
did we-
no.
Someone did.
I've kept it to myself.
Someone did
But I'm
email us.
like-
So it's like, please say
I'm
the
like,
post.
this is so obvious. Like, I would actually just like fork Wondercraft just to add that one feature because like it's so annoying when I don't know what I'm listening to.
We'll fix it. We'll fix it.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The audio generation, you use 11 Labs. What makes a good podcast voice, right? You have a bunch of options that I clicked, and in my mind, I like a deep voice. I like the Morgan Freemans. You don't have that many deep voices. Do we want like? Is there such a thing as a high energy voice? You also insert breaths. 11 Labs has also advertised that they have an AI that can laugh, which I think is fun, important. Basically, what makes a good audio? AI generated audio.
Yeah, it's it depends again on the perspective. Everything is kind of answered with the frame of reference that you're looking at. If you like a deep voice, A, that's kind of a personal preference.
Yeah.
And B, it just kind of depends on the thing. So if you, I don't know, say you're doing something like meditative or kind of affirmations or something that like encourages people every day. You probably do want a slow, deep voice, something relaxing. You're doing the Hacker News recap, like
Cheerful.
we picked Anna, who's like our default
Anna,
voice,
yeah.
because
I have an attachment to Anna.
yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
She's just like news anchory style, very professional, very formal, very neutral,
pleasant. Yeah.
very neutral.
Yeah.
So it depends really on like what makes a good voice. It depends on what you're doing.
Right.
There's a few things, but like if you're doing an interview, I think it also just frankly, then you get into the question of what makes a good podcast. Well, the good podcast is like, I think it's also kind of a personal question, which I haven't, or probably there's a general trend that I'm yet to decipher. But like, yeah, you probably do want a little bit of humanity in there. You want a stutter.
Yeah.
You want some pauses, right? I don't speak in complete utterances. I have an utterance and then I pause it all and then I speak again and so on. Laughs and something to make it human.
Yeah.
It's kind of overlaying of the two. If you have two speakers, this like exchange, right? Like I will be speaking. If you look at the transcript of this episode, we probably overlap in when we're speaking.
And that's fun.
And that's actually interesting, right? Because it is a conversation.
Shows a
that
sign of
we're having.
excitement, especially in our studio when we're 3 people and we're all talking at once. You know it's good.
Yeah. I don't like this zoomification style where like if you're gonna
Your
big
turn.
zoom and
Your
big
turn.
zoom, like only 2 people can speak. The second more than 2 people try to speak,
Yeah.
it's a disaster. So I think it frankly just depends on what you're doing. We are like, at the moment we're really good at like doing this narration stuff, but I think we are building a lot of functionality and tooling to just make this kind of this like multi-host thing more of a reality.
Okay. I would say, objectively, if I was a friend in the company, not that important, So this comes down to how human should your users try to be? Because I'm fine with Hacker News Daily making mistakes because I know it's AI generated.
Yeah.
Right? I would be less fine if you were not upfront. And Alec here actually thought it was a human when he first listened to it because Anna's just really good. But then like you'll make mistakes like pronunciation mistakes. So I actually have a clip that I wanted to play you. Anna takes this on September 8th. Anna was taking a lot of breaths. She was very out of breath.
Damn.
I was very worried about her. She was hyperventilating. I was like, Anna, are you okay? Like, anyway, so basically, I think if you disclose upfront that you're an AI podcast, then people will be like, oh, okay, I tolerate that mistake and I use you for information and not for believing that there's some human on the other side that I might meet someday. But if you're investing so much effort into being real, then your end goal is you have to lie to your users.
I don't think the investing in being real is for the purpose of deception as much as it is for the purpose of making it slightly pleasant to read about. I think on Hacker News, like we do claim, we do say on our Spotify page that like this is an AI generated podcast.
For now, but
as in So there's 2 things. I think if you want to be smart about this, you should say that this is AI generated content. The second people find out that it's not you, the backlash is going to be big.
Yeah.
Right? Because it will be interpreted as deception. So you should do this just to be smart. I don't think there's a point in lying, especially if the content that you're putting out there is just like, this is informational for you, so like consume it. This was efficient. This helped us put it out there. The second thing is, frankly, I don't think it's up to you. whether you tell them or not. Very, very soon, like
They'll know.
Google is just going to mark things
I see.
as AI generated. So I think there's a new thing. I saw like a quick YouTube video about it, so I don't know what the exact terms and conditions are, but like YouTube has, I think, released a new monetization rule, and it does mention something about AI generated content, right? So there is like, it's not up to you anymore. People are gonna know that this is AI generated. So I think it's just in your interest to say that you're AI generated. Ain't no shame.
Yeah, no shame at all.
Because fundamentally, what we do relies on the premise that you have done some content. We don't generate our own content.
Yes.
Right. We don't synthesize our information.
Yes.
It assumes that you've written a blog post, done an actual podcast, or have some artifact on which you want to base what you're feeding through Wondercraft.
Yeah. And you said in some of your material that I've seen before that you are interested in watermarking all your stuff. You haven't done it yet, but whenever there's a standard for doing that, you will do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the thing this is blocking on is like the standard. I'm not super up to date on like what the work on this is.
I think OpenAI will probably like.
But like there just needs to be a standard so everyone can interpret it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Great. I wanted to dive in a little bit on tech options.
Yeah.
And then zoom out to just you asking me questions.
Yeah.
So TTS options. We talked a little bit about 11 Labs. I would also say, as a podcaster, the leading competition to you guys, I know it's not exact competition, but it's Descript.
Yeah.
Because they have overdub.
Yeah, I think Descript is really good. And they're definitely like solid company. I've used their video editor before. It's great. The overdub thing is super useful. I think it's really creative to like edit videos by editing the transcript.
Yes.
Super, super creative, super user friendly.
Would you build that?
I think, again, it's like we're not building for the sake of building. We're building more for the purpose of the user.
Yeah.
Whatever users find more interesting. I think like what we're doing is the use cases are slightly different, right? And I think the people that they're targeting are slightly different.
Yeah.
We do want to have a lot of like automation on the script side to also just like help out with the way you formulate your content or the way you pull your content, much more so than just the editing process.
The ingest. Yeah. Okay, got it. And I just want to map out, here's how I think about TTS, text-to-speech. There's the big cloud options, Amazon Poly, Google text-to-speech, and Microsoft Cognitive Services. As someone who is ex-Amazon, I'm very embarrassed by Poly. It sucks.
Yeah, Google's isn't great, Microsoft.
I'm sure you investigated all these things and you're like, okay, this is like not serious. There's Play.ht, which is probably the other big YC alum. Just quick 2 seconds on your thoughts on Play.ht.
Sounds good. I think it doesn't sound super as good as 11 Labs, my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think
by
sounds
the way,
good.
I have heard other founders tell me this as well.
Yeah,
and I don't know why.
I think they have a a more comprehensive platform.
Okay.
As in they let you do this pronunciation. Like they just have a lot of tooling around it.
So different
features. I think quality in terms of the voice, 11 Labs still better.
Yeah.
I think they are releasing a new model. I don't know if they've released it already or not.
Yeah.
Could be better. I don't know. Yeah. But they do have some functionality out there.
Yeah. They also released the viral Joe Rogan Steve Jobs interview from last year.
Yeah.
And on your landing page, you were like, this is something that Wondercraft will never do. AI content generating, AI content speaking to each other.
Yeah. Who wants to listen to that? Like
apparently a lot of people.
It's fun because it's a cool gimmick. I think it's like nice viral material. I would never listen to like a synthetic Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
This brings us on to a little bit about the whole like content question or the proliferation of AI, which is like, okay, if it's this easy for me to create content that's like, somewhat engaging, like all these AI songs, the Drake song.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so if it's this easy, let's just like, if it's this easy to generate content, well, why will I listen to it? Like, I think we already suffer from the problem that there's an oversaturation of content. So I think, I'll give a Netflix example. When I go on Netflix, there's too much content. I don't like discovering new things. I either know exactly what I'm about to go and watch, or I will rewatch one of the 7 things that I constantly keep rewatching, right? So I'm not like, their discoverability isn't the best, and every now and then I maybe like look at some of the other things, but I'm not trying to look at Netflix.
It's quite funny because they used to invest a lot in their recommendation systems, and like now nobody.
But now it's just
I know
too big. Yeah. It's just too big, and they're like, it's overwhelming. So many tiles that you're looking on the screen.
Yeah.
So cool. Now, what if I told you that there's gonna 1,000x, and half of it's gonna be AI generated?
Yeah.
So what I just said is like we all have this internal proxy of what a thing I'm likely to watch is, which is it was recommended by a friend, or it's one of the things I previously watched. I'm not doing this discoverability. So imagine that's the case. I think another layer of proxy will just be like from in the Netflix category of the like shows and movies, like was this human made or is this AI made? If it's AI made, I'm not watching it. I want real human stuff. So I think there's going to be a fine equilibrium that reaches, which is like it's not even worth generating that much content with AI. I'm talking from entertainment purposes. I'm not talking so much for the social media propaganda, blah blah blah. That not getting into it, but at least from like an entertainment perspective, if I can just always like have an on-demand Drake song that I want to listen to, like, well, at some point I'm just going to listen to Drake because like, you know what I mean?
This is the greatest hits.
Yeah, it's like I'm just going to listen to a curated set. The fundamental thing is curation. It's it's just like a parallel example of the Discord thing. It's like full of noise, so I need to like figure out what is the right thing to consume.
Yeah, awesome. Great answer. I just want to bring through. Here's my map of the market. Right, there's Speechify.com, which focuses on celebrity voices.
Yeah,
I noticed that you don't have celebrity voices, probably because of licensing issues, right? Like
and it's also
to use their voice.
Could at some point, but like not a priority at the moment.
Yeah. I really want a Morgan Freeman one.
That's gonna cost.
I know. Mycroft.ai, privacy focus, run offline. Probably not.
Haven't heard of them actually.
Not important for you. There is some interest in virtual characters for games. So Conv.ai is the one that I had listed here. Did you look at the gaming market?
Not deeply, to be honest.
Yeah,
but it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, people are exploring that. There's obviously HeyGen now, and that is it for as far as like I can scope out the landscape. And then there's the open source systems. So Tortoise TTS, as far as I can tell, is kind of market leader in open source.
Yeah, I would actually say probably a lot of these models were built on top of it.
What models?
Maybe some of the
these other companies. Yeah. There's PyTSX, Koki used to be Mozilla, and then Larynx.
Yeah.
Anyway, all these things. And then there's also sort of research grade stuff coming out of the major big tech companies. You talked about Google Sandstorm.
Probably the one I'm most excited about because
Okay,
it
why?
literally, it's really good. You can like check out the paper.
We'll play a clip.
Yeah, they haven't. I think all you need is like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And it'll just all you need is like a 3-second sample, and it'll play the audio in your tone. It sounds really human as well. Like it has utterances, it laughs, or it's pretty accurate to like. It sounds human.
Yeah.
So very interested in that. They haven't open sourced it, and I assume for good reason.
Yeah.
But
Google
it's
never launches anything. You have to wait for somebody to, or you guys could re-implement it yourself.
Yeah. GPUs after PMF.
That's a nice quote. How strongly do you believe that?
GPUs after PMF?
Yeah.
Well, I think this was another question you have, which is like,
What is PMF?
no, what is your favorite like PG advice in building a company, right?
Yeah.
I think that my favorite thing is just like don't spend your money foolishly.
Okay.
Everyone and their mother is trying to get a GPU at the moment,
Yeah.
so I don't think we're definitely substantially reducing our runway by doing that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do that when you believe the investment is worth it.
Yeah.
And again, you have to pick the time at which you do that.
I mean, there's other companies. I think this is somewhat consensus. I think the non-consensus thing is to spend a shit ton. So like Inflection raising a few $100 million and then it's spending 95% of it on GPUs.
Same with Mistral. I think it depends on the company you're launching. I think if you're like, maybe you're a brand new TTS company, maybe it is worth just doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. There's also Audio LM, also out of Google, Val E from Microsoft, and Meta Voice Box.
Yeah.
Are you just watching any of these?
Watching any of these, obviously paying close
try
attention.
them all out. Yeah.
Try them all out.
And like, what are you looking for?
Open source.
What is like the holy grail? What are you looking for?
Just honestly how human it sounds and like how likely I'd be to listen to this if I did it. Also how like customizable it is.
Yeah.
I think the problem with all these voice things and generally with a lot of the AI stuff is it is somewhat random, but you're using it in production applications that require certainty. Right? Just as an example, if I promise my users this podcast or this segment will be 30 seconds, it needs to be 30 seconds. Or, given some SLA.
There's some tolerance.
Some SLA around it's 95% of that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these things just tend to be a little random at the moment. So like can I literally specify a tone that I'd like this to read it in and be certain that it's doing it and it's not some weird like attempt at sounding surprised?
Yeah.
It's just like, basically how controllable and how realistic they sound.
Yeah. And then final question around just the landscape of TTS. What are the unique challenges for non-English TTS? And I'll tell you, right? So I'm interested in having 28 languages of latent space, right? That's only good things for me. except if it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no way to validate.
I think that's the problem with
Latent space Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with dubbing. I think so. So the reason, one thing we're gradually building out, but we already have as part of our dubbing product, is that we have QA as part of that. So we actually work with professional translators to just make sure that the things that we publish sound realistic.
Oh, you should put that up front.
Yeah. So that's really one of the, like, fundamentally the problem with dubbing, if you ask anyone who's ever tried to dub, is you don't know what good sounds like in these other languages. You're like, I can tell you I dub, but I'm going to tell you that. I think there's a lot of big podcast studios who have tried this before. There's one I can think of that's tried this maybe 5 times with 5 different companies in the last 5 years. Their fundamental problem is that you just cannot. Yeah, fine. Spanish sounds good to me as the person who doesn't speak Spanish, but like it doesn't sound good to a Spanish person or an Argentine person who have totally different accents, right? So I think the tricky thing as well is getting that straight is in English, it's very clear, and there's a huge proliferation of content in every single accent, if you will, Australian, English, British, American, Irish, whatever. In other languages, especially if you consider the niche ones, I don't know. I'll pick like German. There's like a few German accents. I don't know how much content Austria puts out because they have a specific accent, right?
Yeah.
Germany itself, probably every
Swiss German.
Yeah, just record Roger Federer speaking, right? So there's just a lot of nuance that isn't as widely available. The English market is just the biggest.
Yeah.
And I say this as someone I say this as someone who speaks German, but like, think of all the other languages. I have no idea what Spain Spanish sounds like and Argentina Spanish sounds like. There's a difference. I know that. Just don't know what it sounds like.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if you ever need Chinese validation, I know I have some very fanatical Chinese listeners who translate every podcast.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we can use that as QA.
Yeah, I would definitely love that.
So shout out to the Chinese army. Great. Awesome. What do you want to ask me as a podcaster?
So tell me about your setup process for setting up a podcast.
Oh my God.
And I think goes far back as like, cool, you know what guests you're having on. You've just like, no.
Oh, you mean
even
starting
back.
like from
even
zero?
Further back.
From
it's
zero.
Like, I want to talk about someone in this space.
So like for a new episode or for a completely new podcast?
New episode.
A new episode is pretty easy, right? Like the way I set it up with you was like, hey, I'm a fan. Do you want to chat? And you said yes, and we scheduled.
And how long did it take to get the scheduling right?
Scheduling. You guys are very responsive and very easy to work with.
Nice.
Some others are very hard. Like we took a few months for Harrison to come on.
Yeah, he said that in the
for you guys, it would need 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then we got this studio. We came here, and then all 3 of us spent 50 minutes setting up the audio for ourselves.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, we pay someone to do it, and so we just kind of walk in and start recording.
Yeah. And how do you come up with the questions that you want to ask?
I do prep and research on you and the business, and usually it has a format of find information about the speaker, and then like get to know you on a personal basis, put you at ease, so that you'll be more open for the other stuff.
Yeah.
Because I care about you as a human being, not just as an interview subject.
Yeah.
Then talk about the business. I do emphasize the what is question. They're very straightforward, like what the hell it is you're doing, because people want a clear answer, and some people cannot give a clear answer, and that's also information. Then I always am interested about company building, just because I'm a founder myself, and I want to learn about what it's like on your side and ask the business side of things as well. Some people don't have that side because they're academics. So then you go more into their research and try to keep up with any academic and theory and math that they might bring up. And then maybe try to, at the end, and this is the hardest bit, and this is the stuff that I have the most second guessing about, try to have a segment at the end where you ask a consistent set of questions for essentially norming across guests. So I have a system prompt for our guests, and at the end of it, we basically end every episode with a lightning round, right? Acceleration, exploration, takeaway. I don't love the questions that we ask. We're still iterating on that.
Nice. You got to experiment to do it.
Yeah, I think just people like latent space mostly because the kind of questions that I ask are the stuff that is on everybody's minds, because I just talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I just force you to answer them because you're right in front of me. That's great.
It's great. And so you have this is a whole interesting conversation because, right, human podcaster, AI podcast.
Yes.
Right. So as a human podcaster and someone who was with like a really popular show, and also someone who can actually like implement this stuff himself, what is some of the AI tooling recently that you've like baked into your processes?
I only use the script. And we built for editing. So for example, and by the way, this goes into a theory of content, which as a content creator myself, professionally, and as an advisor, I have, which is that we develop a few show formats. Latent Space is a channel. It's kind of like a TV channel, and channels need different formats.
Yeah.
So you have like the reality TV show, you have the news show, you have the the cooking show, whatever. For us, we have the founder interview, straightforward. Everyone has them. We have the breaking news Twitter space, and that is a like we want to be the day one first podcast to come out with the most in-depth breakdown of something that everybody needs to know, and that has high value to people, right? Because if you're like a week delayed, 1 month delayed, then no one cares anymore. And then finally, we have the fundamentals, like the one-on-one evergreen episodes that are less time-bound. So this one is relatively time-bound because it's a snapshot of who you are right now. But we want to have evergreen episodes that people can go back 2-3 years in the backlog and still get value from.
Yeah, and these more fundamental ones.
Yes. So we have 3 show formats right now. And I would say we have different tooling for each, right? So the one that I don't need any tooling for essentially is the fundamentals one, because we plan basically every minute of that show. It is a lot of work, but it's high quality because people love it.
Yeah.
It's got the longest tail by design, right? Like, yeah. The Twitter Spaces require Descript because a lot of silences and a lot of ums, and that's not good podcast audio. So you got to cut it out.
So you literally just go in, like you edit out the Twitter space that you did. You recorded and then you edit it out.
Usually it's like 2 hours. We cut it down to 1.
Okay.
And it's a lot of pain and a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's the only way that I get some pretty high profile people onto my podcast without booking them.
Yeah.
They just show up.
Yeah.
And that has value to me, right? Like Simon Willison has been on my podcast 3 times and I never had to schedule him.
Yeah.
And people love him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great. He's and then this one, we do. I don't need the script, obviously, but we do use Small Podcaster, which is a 100-line script, Python script that throws the transcript into Anthropic and then generates show notes.
Nice.
So that's about it for now.
Nice. So, but it's interesting because I think you're in a very nice position where you're able to do what a lot of these services charge you for. You can just do it yourself.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one.
But obviously, I'm interested in paying for things because my time is valuable, and if it does a good job, then I'll use it. For Wondercraft, the thing that I really wanted was the RSS2 podcasting, right? Which you now have. So I'll try it out, but chances are I will not be happy with something.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, how much customizability do you give me?
Yeah.
To do that, and we'll see.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. These are all my questions.
I would say, well, you missed out one thing, which is marketing the podcast, which is a huge part, right? Like that is mostly my job.
So how do you market your podcast?
Twitter.
So you think Twitter is a good medium for that?
Twitter and Hacker News.
In threads or like you post clips, or what do you do?
I have tried posting clips. It's just too much work.
Yeah.
So if you guys do a good job of clips, I will use your stuff. But it's just too much work.
Yeah.
So mostly I just put like a big post saying like, so for like our George Hotz episode, we were like, Latent Space is excited to present George Hotz on Tiny Corp commoditizing petaflops, something like that. And just sometimes the fame of the guest will just lead the episode.
Just, bring them
so the one I dropped yesterday was Chris Ladner,
Yeah.
right? And people were like, Chris Ladner's a boss. I don't care about anything else. Just like, I want to hear as many Chris Ladner tokens as possible. Others who are like less famous, like I have to introduce who you are and why I care about you, why they should care about you.
Yeah.
Because most people will not have heard about you as well as you've done.
Yeah.
So then I need to make the case a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that's fine. That's my job.
Yeah.
I just think it takes a lot of work, and that's the part that will be hardest for me to hand over to AI, since I have a very specific voice for myself, and apparently all AIs think that Twitter to tweet you have to have emojis and hashtags, which is so dumb. It's so obviously dumb. The training data is very
I think
bad.
it depends, right? Sometimes you do, if you're trying to be more on the professional side, you don't.
Yeah.
It just depends kind of on the tone and brand voice, I guess.
It's just cringe.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with AI. AI is mid by design,
Yeah.
right?
It is
And
mid.
you do not want to be mid as a thought leader, as a content creator. People don't want to subscribe to mid things. They want to subscribe to a level slightly ahead of where they are. And so that's, for better or worse, where we target.
Which I guess the interesting thing for us is like, how do we really enable that, you have your process and really bake that in to make sure that what you're presenting and what you're coming out with is unique.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing though. I'm happy to hand over my LinkedIn to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a LinkedIn following. I don't use it, right? So completely money on the table there. So happy to like give that to you. You don't do social media posting, right? So I have to go get like Sprout Social or Buffer, both of which are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an adjacent product someday, you might want to get into basically money on the table marketing. Is what I think about it.
Yeah.
Basically, like we would not do this by ourselves, and like it is still inferior to like a human crafted thing, but it doesn't matter because I'd have zero LinkedIn presence.
Mm-hmm.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Great answers.
Obviously, happy to offer any thoughts as you build out for podcasters. Okay, well, shall we go into the lightning round?
Let's do it.
Like the one I just said that I wasn't confident about.
Great intro.
Yeah. But these came from previous guests.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think we haven't found PMF yet on those things. So acceleration, what has already happened in AI that you thought would take much longer?
The GPT, like the fact
GPT
that
moment.
basically you can do anything.
Yeah.
Obviously, it might not be the smartest way to do it, but you can basically do anything with GPT.
Yeah. And were you watching it while you were at Palantir? Because Palantir has some AI stuff.
Yeah, I think vaguely.
Yeah.
I think it really blew up after.
Yeah.
I think Palantir really
You just happened to be the right spot where like Moonshot wasn't like super working.
Yeah.
So you were open enough to actually pursue this seriously.
Yeah. And I think Palantir also just like shifted the whole strategy once it blew up the way it did.
Yeah. Awesome. Exploration. What if you weren't doing what you're doing? What do you think is the most interesting unsolved question in AI?
Great question. There's so many things.
Pick one.
There's like the context length. There's just the.
You want longer context length?
The latency and like how to just kind of make everything flow through much quicker, because I think you can then enable some really interesting real-time applications.
Are you interested in real-time? Actually, I was
As
meaning to
Wondercraft,
think about that.
Not necessarily.
Right? Because your whole thing is async, right?
Maybe, yeah. But like maybe in the future for some other product. But as personally, it's interesting. And also just the ability to like, the interesting stuff is the validation. Right, I actually think it's the QA that we were talking about.
You mean evals?
You still need human QA.
Yeah, especially yours is the hardest to QA.
Yeah,
I would say. Okay, very cool.
It's very time consuming.
Takeaway: what is one message you want all our listeners to remember? Take away with them.
Okay. If you would like to start a podcast, start. We're here to help. Super easy. If you have a podcast, we want to help you make it more accessible by dubbing it. On the other side, if you are like a founder and AI engineer, I think it's really important to convince yourself that what you're building is valuable. Don't like listen to people saying, you have a moat or you don't have a moat. Convince yourself of what that is, and launch and like don't burn that much money.
Frequently and often, don't spend your money.
Yeah. Be smart about it.
Yeah, I think you are one of the most successful cases of AI engineers so far. I'm really glad to spend time with you in person, and excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, it was great coming here. Great meeting you guys in London.
Yeah,
and see you soon.
All right, see you.
Bye.
How's that?
Great, man. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Very much. It was a good conversation, and I think you.